Hey guys, welcome back to my channel if you're returning, or welcome to my channel if you're new. So I asked a poll this week. I said, what content do we prefer? SAT math, English, or college essays? And SAT English won by just a little bit, but gotta honor the people's request, of course. So today we're gonna be talking about SAT comparison questions. If you've ever heard the expression, you can't compare apples to oranges, the SAT really takes that to heart. So we're going to talk about how to approach them, how to recognize them, and obviously how to get the correct answer. And again, guys, before we start the video, all of the links for our upcoming crash courses, like the June SAT crash course and our SAT math workbook, will be linked in the description down below. So without further ado, let's hop into today's video. All right, so we're going to discuss a few different things when it comes to the SAT and comparison questions. So the first thing we're going to discuss for each of the problems that I've gathered here is going to be, how the heck do we even recognize that this is a comparison question? So we'll talk about that for each problem. Then we'll see what it is that we are comparing. And then obviously we'll talk about obtaining the correct answer. So let's begin with this first question here, question 17 from practice test 8. All right, so first and foremost, we know that this is a comparison question because I see similar to in the actual paragraph, and similar to indicates that we're dealing with a comparison because we're pointing out two things that are going to be alike in two different situations. So that's how we know that this is a comparison question. So now we need to figure out what we're comparing, because we got to make sure that we're comparing identical things across the board for the SAT to consider it to be a valid comparison. Okay, so we want to look for what it is that they're talking about before we see the comparison words here similar to. And we can see it says many of the moves in the dance, and then they give us some examples, we don't really care about that, are similar to something. All right, so what that means then is that we're comparing the moves in the dance. So we need to compare the moves in the dance to the moves in, we could see we're talking about martial arts and acrobatics, to the moves in martial arts and acrobatics. So when I scan through the choices though, I don't see the moves in martial arts and acrobatics presented or posed as any option here. So what that means then is that we're going to have to use the pronoun version of moves. So moves right here is a plural word. It refers to more than one move. And as a pronoun, when it comes to comparison for something plural on the SAT, we're going to use the word those. So instead of saying the moves in martial arts and acrobatics, we're going to say those in martial arts and acrobatics, which would align them with choice D. However, let's just briefly touch on why A, B, and C are incorrect. So A is comparing the moves in the dance to the actual sport of martial arts and acrobatics. You can't compare like a small part of one thing, which is the moves in the dance, not like actually dance itself as a genre, to the actual genre or sport of martial arts and acrobatics. That's not a valid or equal comparison. So knock out A. B is pretty much the same thing. To compare the moves to the actual discipline, the sports themselves of martial arts and acrobatics, again, that's not an equal or valid comparison. And C, to compare the moves in the dance to the actual people, the artists and the acrobats who perform the sport, is not valid. You can't compare human beings to a thing. So knock out C. So we're left then with choice D. And again, those refers to the moves. So this is a valid or equal comparison. Alrighty then, checking out practice test 6, number 30 right here. So again, how do we know that this is a comparison question? We see that it says shorter than in the actual paragraph. So whenever we see something that ends with ER, nicer, smarter, shorter, taller, cooler, we know that we're dealing with a comparison, and THAN as a word always indicates comparison, not to be confused with THEN, which is used for sequence or order. So whenever we see THAN or an ER ending word, it's probably, again, the case that it's going to be a comparison question. So what is it that we're comparing? We want to look in the sentence before the comparison words hit. So the training period for PAs. So we're talking about the training period for PAs. And then we see that we're talking about something with physicians. So we got to compare that then to make it equal to the training period for physicians. All right. So we saw in the last problem, again, we don't see this as a choice presented here. We saw in the last problem that we replaced that word with those as the pronoun. But training period in this case is actually singular. It refers to just one period, not multiple. So the word that the SAT, the pronoun that they'll use to replace something singular, is going to be that. Unlike in the last problem, we had something plural, we went with the word those. Okay, so let's begin with choice A then. Those is plural, so that's out. That is good in B, that is good in C. And if we were to delete the underlined portion, we would be comparing the training period for PAs to the actual doctors, the physicians themselves. So again, that's an invalid comparison. All right, so now we're between B and C, and you might be tempted to go with B because it says compared in there. It's all, on the vibe of a comparison, but we don't want to do that. Again, we're comparing the training period for PAs, it says right here, to the training period for physicians. So in order to keep the structure as similar as possible across the board for the comparison, we want to keep whatever word they opted for when they initially drew the comparison. So we prefer not with, but instead we prefer the word for to keep the comparison as level as possible. So C would be correct here. Alrighty, another question from practice test 6. So again, we know that this is going to be a comparison question because we see that word THAN again, which we said is always indicative of the fact that we are drawing a comparison. So we got to look in the sentence right before that word. We are talking about a transition. So we're comparing a transition to a transition. All right, and a transition is singular, it's not transition. So if transition is singular, again, the word that we're going to use to replace it is going to be that. So that's why choice C has got to be the correct answer. It cannot be choices A or B, these or those, because we could see that both of those choices are going to be plural. We're dealing with something singular. And choice D is comparing the transition to basically nothing. If you get rid of this, there's going to be nothing that's there, so that's not going to work as a comparison because then again, it's not level. So knock out D as well. Alrighty, PSAT 2, we see that the comparison word here is the same as the first example that we looked at. So we see similar to, so again, we know that we are dealing with a comparison question. So scan the sentence right before the comparison word. Homes will be sold to qualifying artists at prices similar to blank. So we're basically comparing the prices of homes. And let's see, we should be comparing that to the prices of economy cars. And again, the reason why we know that it has to be cars is because we're talking about the prices of multiple homes. So it would only make sense to compare something plural to something that's also plural. So we can knock out choice A because that's singular. Same thing goes with B, singular. Same thing goes with C, singular. So the only choice that's plural, so prices, as we said before, that was going to be a plural word. So the pronoun we would replace that with would be those. So we're comparing prices of homes to the prices of economy cars, which is the same thing as those of economy cars because those replaces prices as the noun. Alrighty, and last but not least, we have practice test number 10 right here. So how do we know again that this is going to be a comparison question? We can see the word less right here. And then in the choices, again, we see either than in A, B, and C or compared in D. So that's how we again know it's going to be a comparison question. So let's see what it is that we're comparing. We're comparing, let's see. the students who were required to volunteer rushed their hours and they did significantly less volunteer work in 12th grade. So basically, we're comparing the students doing less work to, obviously in the next part, we're saying the students doing more work, the ones who were not required, obviously, to volunteer. Okay. So what I want to point out is this one is actually a little bit unique in that it's not a noun that we're comparing, it's a verb. The students doing more or less work in this situation to the students doing more or less work in that situation. So this one, let's just write down verb because it's a little bit unlike the others. And these are definitely more rare, but obviously still good to know. Alrighty, so let's start with choice A. So choice A is saying that the students did less work than the service hours. You can't compare the students doing an action to the actual service hours themselves because that's comparing a verb to a noun, so that's not going to work. Choice B, we could see the students did less work than did the students. So again, here we're comparing the verb right up here. This is a verb to the verb in the actual prompt, so that makes sense. That's a valid comparison, verb to verb. C, we cannot compare the students doing less volunteer work to the hours, like again, the noun that the students work, the hours, so that's out. And then D, we can't compare the students doing less work to the actual students themselves. It needs to be to what the students did, not the actual human beings themselves. So choice B is the only one here that compares verb to verb. So again, just as a summary, look for your comparison words similar to ER ending words or THAN. Compared in the answer choices as well would be a great sign it's a comparison question. Figure out what you're comparing, make sure you're comparing the right things, make sure you're preserving the singular, that, plural, those, and then go ahead and pick an answer from there. There we go, guys. That's how we deal with the SAT comparison questions. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned a lot. If so, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and also to subscribe to my channel so you can get more videos from me, of course. Again, the links for all of our upcoming crash courses like the June SAT crash course and our SAT workbook will be down below in the description. Also, make sure to follow me on TikTok. The handle is Test Prep Tips over there. Thanks again, guys, for watching. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.